A little bit earlier, I was on a call with a buddy, actually a business partner. We're working on a really cool product right now that we're going to be bringing to you guys here in over the next really 6 to 9 months. But we talked about an idea that I think is very powerful for entrepreneurs, for creatives, for anybody that's trying to grow and trying to improve at life. Because if you are a high achiever, which I assume that you are if you're listening to a podcast like this, right? Why else would you be listening to a podcast that's all designed around helping you maximize your return on life if you are not a high achiever? The problem with that, though, is as a high achiever, there can become this expectation that you're always operating at your peak, right? A peak performer does not mean that you're always operating at your peak. In fact, what I want to share with you today is the chaotic path of improvement. And then I want to share with you 3 types of energy you need to learn how to deploy and do so strategically to keep moving that chaotic path of mastery, a chaotic path of improvement upwards and to the right. Now, here's the simple idea is that in life, by definition, you will spend 50% of your time feeling above average, and you will spend 50% of your time feeling below average. That is just how averages work, right? So if we were to draw this squiggly line and then a line straight through the middle, right? About 50% is above and about 50% is below. That's how averages work. Now, in a previous video, I recently talked about the 2% rule. The 2% rule is born out of this idea that we can take from casinos, which says in blackjack, the house only has a 0.5% to 1% odds of winning any given hand. With optimal play, their chances of beating you are only 0.5 to 1% better. And yet in that 1% difference, they're only 51% more likely to win versus your 49% likely to lose. But in that, they make billions of dollars of profit off of you. And we have this phrase, the house always wins. The house does not always win. The house simply wins 2% of the time more often than you. Think about that, 2% of the time more than you. And that's a very powerful idea. Because what I want you to consider is that to move this path upwards and to the right, and this is what we call the chaotic path of improvement. Now, if you're listening on the podcast on Spotify or on iTunes, I'd encourage you to go to the YouTube channel, go to find Amplified Impact. You can see the drawings here. But this is really just a squiggly line that goes upwards and to the right with a line drawn straight through the center. Now, if we can take this mindset into our day-to-day activities, that we do not need to dominate the day. We don't need to win 90% of the time. We don't need to win 80% of the time. We don't need to win 70% of the time. All we need to do is win 51% of the time. And then that means we're only losing 49%. That is how this chaotic path of improvement goes upward and to the right. You only need to be 1%. You need to only win 2% of the time more than you lose. If you do that, slowly but surely, you will go up and to the right. Now, here's the crazy thing, is if you do this on a long enough time frame, it doesn't feel like much. You're only winning 1% or 2% more than when you're losing. On a day-to-day basis, that doesn't feel like anything, right? Like you will feel most of your time as though you're about losing as often as you're winning. But because the brain fixates on losses, right? Daniel Kahneman talked about this in his books, Thinking Fast and Slow, that what's it called? Loss aversion bias. It's one of the cognitive biases that says we feel our losses more deeply than our wins, our successes. The losses hurt more. And they mapped this out. They showed this by asking people, or not asking, but actually measuring this, which would hurt more, which would give you more pleasure or pain. Would it be if I gave you $100 or if I took $100 from you? Right? Like it's fundamentally the same thing. Like you lose $100, you get $100, but losing the $100 was more painful than gaining the $100. And so that's the first idea here, is that you are going to fixate on that 49% of the time that you're losing, and it will feel more like 80%, right? Your subjective feeling of that is like, man, I'm losing so much, but all you got to do is win just slightly more than you lose. And just realize that you're going to be discounting those victories. Now, if you do this, this line will go up and to the right, and over time, let's say this is year 1, and this is year 2, and this is year 3, If you keep with it and you keep winning just a little bit, just slightly more than you're losing, right? If you just keep doing this, you'll get to this really interesting point here where if you were to draw a line, and honestly, this is all very unscientific. Obviously, I should have like drawn an XY grid and made this much better, but like you get the idea if you're watching the video. Is that at a certain point, your low, your new low in year 3 is about equal to your high in year 1, your peak potential, like what your great days, like, and you're a peak performer, right? So this is the peak. This is where you want to be. You keep this up, you keep winning by just 2% day after day, year after year, then you get to a point where your new low, your new losses are still superior than your victories, your peaks at previous times. Now, here's another idea that I want to suggest to you is that as a peak performer, often we can get it inside our heads that because we're a peak performer, it means we need to always be operating at our peak, always up here. And that's just not how it works, right? You look at professional athletes. No athlete maintains their peak throughout the season. This is the playoffs, right? They're at the playoffs, but everything else underneath this is just as important, right? The base building, this is the foundation, this is the off season, right? And then they have the regular season where they're getting into shape. And then they have something else that happens in here. I don't know. But eventually they get to the playoffs, and that's when they're peaking, and they're only going to hold their peak for a couple weeks, maybe a month, maybe 2 months. But like track athletes are notoriously only able to hold their peak for a couple of weeks at a time. And then they got to go back to base building. They got to go back to the beginning and start rebuilding. And so you're never going to operate exclusively in that peak performance zone, right? You're going to have these other phases. And that's where it comes to the 3 types of energy that I want to plant inside of your head. 3 types of energy. You have first activation energy. Activation energy is the energy that's required to get you to take action. It is the hardest energy to come by. It is the catalyst in the chemical reaction that makes the different substances actually do something. This is getting your ass off the couch and getting into the gym. It's the hardest thing. It's sitting down and staring at the blank page before you start to write. It's the activation energy that requires you to overcome inertia and actually start doing something. It's incredibly energy intensive. It's so hard, and this is why most people will never do it. But once you've activated, once you're in the process of doing the thing, once you have momentum, once you're in the gym, once you're in flow on that page, things get a lot easier. Now you only need maintenance energy. Maintenance energy is static. It's very easy once the thing is in motion, because once an object is in motion, it tends to stay in motion, right? Just got to keep the momentum going. The hard thing about activation energy is, you're either spiraling up or you're spiraling down. And so you have momentum in a particular direction. This activation energy has to overcome that and get you moving in the direction that you want, right? Maintenance energy, though, once you're going up, it's quite a lot easier to keep going. Now, the reason I was talking with my buddy about this concept before we hopped on, before I started recording this, was actually this 3rd type of energy that I think a lot of people overlook, especially as peak performers and entrepreneurs and founders, where we're constantly in this push, grind phase. And we think, I'm a peak performer, I need to always be at the top, right? Well, the truth is that there's also growth energy. There's growth energy. Growth energy is what you need, or what you have, when you go through these periods of really high motivation. You have a good night's sleep. You're entering into a season of your life where things just seem to be ticking along. Life is feeling really good, and you just feel strong. When you feel that growth energy, you need to capitalize on it. When you feel that momentum building, you need to take that growth energy and shove it into the system, because that's when you start seeing not just this kind of spiraling growth up and right. That's when you start to see step functions of growth. You see how like suddenly out of nowhere, there's just this gigantic jump, and that's from growth energy. Now, in the same way that a lion feasts and famines, right? Like sometimes it's feasting, sometimes it's napping. You have to recognize in your own life that there are base building periods of time where you just need to be putting in maintenance energy, right? Like you're just going through the motions in the gym. You've gotten your ass into the gym. You're at a pretty good place with your health, but you have other priorities that are competing with your attention right now. You want to grow your business. You want to invest more time in your relationships. And so you only have so much maintenance energy to put into that particular area of your life. And that's okay, because the amount of maintenance energy required to maintain is far, far less than the amount of activation energy required to get you to that place. But there will come a point when, for whatever reason, the stars align, you have the dopamine, you have the motivation, or you just now have aligned your goals to say, this thing that I was maintaining before, it is the new priority. And now when you do that, it's going into growth mode. And that means you are going to shove as much energy into that thing as you possibly can so that you can get that step function of growth. And when you do that, this becomes your new baseline. And you never end up dropping below that again as you start to use your maintenance energy here again. Like you're not going to drop back down below to where you were prior to that step function of growth. This is what happens when you start your business and you're doing, your first 10K a month is a grind. That's hard. And then you get there and you're like, okay, maintaining 10K a month is actually pretty damn easy. I'm just going to keep maintaining this, right? And maybe you're focused on other things in life at this point because you were working so hard to go from 0 to a 10K. But now you're like, I want to go to, now I'm motivated. For whatever reason, I got in this room with other people whose their thermometers are set to such a higher temperature than mine. It inspired me. I want to go to 100K per month now. Well, you got to shove everything you got into that. And once you get to that 100K, now you can go back to maintenance mode. You can maintain it. It's much easier once you have it. But just recognize these flows, these rhythms are how we work as humans. You cannot just keep grinding perfectly up and to the right. It's this chaotic path of improvement, up and down and up and down. But there's occasionally these moments in time when the stars align and you're motivated, you're inspired. And here's the idea is that I want you to remember inspiration is perishable. Inspiration is perishable. So the moment you have an idea, the moment you have the motivation, the desire to hit that 100K month or the $1 million month, the $10 million month, whatever that is, you need to move and start throwing as much growth energy into this thing as possible. Because the more time that you allow to elapse between when you have the idea and when you take action, the more likely you are to fail. And so get that momentum on your side, take action, shove it all in, and I think you'll be very surprised about where you are. If you consider that path over the next 3 to 5 years, you're going to be unstoppable. Now, if any of this resonated, if you find yourself at a point where you're looking to stop putting in maintenance energy, you're ready to start growing, you want some help with that, you are tired of 10K months, you want to go to 100K, you're tired of 100K months, you want to go to 1 million months, go to beyondtheapex.com. You can apply for the group coaching program that we run. I'd love the opportunity to work with you. Again, if you're not doing 10K a month, that's fine. You need to conquer that first battle before you're a good fit for the program. But if you're already there, you have a business that's successful, it's working, but you want to take it to that next level, but you don't want to grow it in a way that makes you grow to hate your life, go to Beyond the Apex, apply for the coaching program. I'd love the opportunity to work with you. Otherwise, subscribe to the channel and we'll see you back here tomorrow.